Okay. I hope I don't have to catch my sleep. Okay, so Zok the Heilige Gemara. Hayoim Tishav Arbaim Yoim Shehem Shiva Shavuos Laimer. Congratulations to all those who made it to the finish line. Zok the Heilige Gemara. Shem Shecholkin Betua Kacholkin Beteven Uvekash. Omer Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef said, the Bavel Nahig. In Bavel they had a minig. The Lo Yahivi Tivna Larisa. The straw was not given to the Oris. That remained with the Balabayas. Why do I need to know that in Bavel they did that? The Yoyev, if someone does give his sharecropper Teven, he doesn't have to. It's not a chiyuv because it's not the minig Medina. Rather, Ayin Yafahi, he's doing a bonus for his sharecropper. And you can't draw a conclusion from there to be mechayev anybody else to do that. Rashi explains that around the perimeter of fields, what they would do is, for security purposes, they would dig a trench, and the earth from the trench they piled up to build a little bit of a ridge all the way around. And they would do that 3 times. As Rashi says, after they did this the first time, eventually the mound starts getting squashed down. They did it again. So for 3 times, we expected that the owner of the field, not a sharecropper, has to do that. The owner of the field has to do the basic security measures and the Kani de Chizra. On top of that mound, they would have a series of vertical posts, and then for security, in between the vertical posts, they would put horizontal weaving back and forth through the posts. So the vertical post, the balabais, was the responsibility of the balabais, but the Chizra Gufei, but the horizontal slats that you would put in between the posts, the Arisa, would be the responsibility of the Aris. Kalal Demosa, the general rule is, the main security measures, the balabais, the Tuyasa Yaserta, the enhanced security measures, the Arisa. Rabbi Yosef, Mara, who has to provide the tools, the working tools? Mara is hoe, zvila, v'dava. These are all tools that are used in the fields. Most Jewish people today don't know what they are. Every tool to us is just a knife. It's either a knife, it could be a screwdriver, it could be an axe. Our universal Swiss Army knife is the knife. So the halacha of Vizarnuka is the balabayas. These are all the balabayas has to provide these tools. Arisa Ovid Ve'Uri. What does the Oris have to do? Zok Rashi, the Oris has to do Be'Uri. All of lasses charitzim misfas hanor about soifa sada. There usually would be a river that would be near each field, and then they would build small ditches to allow the water to spread throughout the field. Digging those ditches was the responsibility of the Oris. Kishem shecholkin biyayin kacholkin bizmura shuvakanim. Frankly, kanim maya viditayu. What are we? Kanim are not things that grow in the field. Those are posts that you put in before you even plant to support those vines. Amid Rabbi Yanai, kanim hamuchlokim shebehen mamidim esagafanim. So what are these kanim? They are they're not rough with the bark. They're little posts that we've peeled the bark up. They're nice and smooth, and they were used to support the vines. Ushnei misapkim zakanim. Why do we need to tell us that 2 people are misapik it? It's just giving a reason for why they're split. You know why they split them at the end equally? They both had to pay for them, so they each paid 50% of those posts. Naturally, at the end of the deal, they split up. Someone was makabel a field from his friend, and Rashi says this applies. Sayif was through Chakiris, Sayif was through Kablonis, and it is a Beis HaShlochin. Beis HaShlochin is a field that doesn't get enough rainwater. Because of that, it has a well on the property, and that well is completely relied on to irrigate the property. Should that well dry up, this property is useless. Or it was a field that had trees on it, and as we learned, the fruit of the tree, if the Oris gets them, we were discussing if the Oris gets them, that's a real bonus, because the Oris doesn't have to work for those at all. They grow by themselves, and the Oris gets them, so that's a huge advantage. If you're an Oris to do work in a field that has an Elon, So what happens if Yaveh Shemayim v'Niksa Ilan, those two huge advantages evaporated? Einoi menakaloi min chekurei. I don't have a right to say, you know what, I was going to give you 10 bushels of wheat per year. That's because there were these beautiful features there. There's the well, there's the tree. It's not there. I'm not giving you 10 bushels. I'm going to give you 8 bushels. However, so the halacha is you can't reduce the price. However, what if it was specified that the reason why I'm taking this field is because of these features? If the farmer told the property owner, I'd like to do a deal with you on this property with a well, on this property with a tree, there he specified clearly that's why he wants to do it. And therefore, then he does have a right to say, hey, I wasn't willing to give you so much, I want to give you less. And in fact, Rashi says this applies equally to kablanas. I was going to give you a third, but now that it doesn't have these features and it's so much harder work for me, I'm going to give you maybe only a quarter. Hey Chidami, what exactly happened over here that the Beis HaShlachin is no longer active? If the big river that provided the whole region with water, if that dried up, why do we put the onus, the whole problem, on the farmer? Namely, Makas Medina. If it's a Makas Medina, everybody has to share equally in the pain. You've got to spread the love around. As Rashi quotes, it had an epidemic of grasshoppers, or if a windstorm took out all the pears. In Makas Medina, the law is we all have to suffer. So Avada, he could take off some. We don't force the farmer to absorb all of these losses. So over here as well, Nemalei Makavadihi. Amar Papa, you're right, it wasn't the big river. It's the Yavish Narazuta. It's only the small little area, Zuk Rashi. Amas Hamaim Shemshichu Mina Noragadol, Eitzel Abiga, Lahashka Shemena. The main river is flowing. The smaller brook that was used to connect the big river to this area, that's what dried up. Why is it that we don't say it's a Makas Medina? Because Taisa speaks out, even if there's a whole bunch of fields that are suffering from it, it's because the owner of the property could say, the water's there, it's not very close by, but it's close enough by. Your responsibility includes taking yourself a couple of pails and schlepping water from the bigger river. Amar Papa, Hani Tarti Misnisa. Sorry? The what?
It was a Makas Medina, it's not the landowner's fault.
Okay. You can't normally the landowner. I rent you a property, and it has lousy output. So I'll say Maslach Karim. I give you a regular good field, Maslach Karim. But if it's a Makas Medina, you can't say Maslach Karim because everybody is suffering. So that's the whole question. Could the Balabai say Maslach Karim? You rented a bad property. Talk to more about it. Omar Papa. Tani Tarti Masnisa Kamaisa. Hani Tarti Masnisa Kamaisa Mishkachas Ben Bechakrunusa Ben Bekabanusa. The last Mishnah that we learned would apply equally to a Chayker or a Kablan, as we pointed out, as we looked at Mishnah. Whether it's Chakirs or Kablanas, I could say I don't want to pay as much because I only took it under the assumption that it had an Elon, that it had a well, or it had a river feeding it. But Mikan Velech, the next halachas that we're going to learn in the Mishnahs, we'll get to them, not today, but we'll get to them. Or actually, we will get to them today in the next Mishnah. The Isa bekablanusa less bechakrinusa. Though some halachas apply by kablanus but not by chakiras, well, Isa bechakrinusa less bekablanusa. And Rashi says, as we learn each Mishnah, I will highlight what it applies to. Why is it, even if the farmer said, I want this field, this Beis HaShlachin field, I want this field with the tree in it, who said that it literally means it has a tree? In Philadelphia, there was a dormitory that was called Strawberry Mansion. There were no strawberries in that mansion. I can tell you one thing. There might have been roaches and squirrels, but there were no strawberries there. But it was called Strawberry Mansion because sometimes properties have names. So let the masker say, let the owner say, when you said this property with the tree, it means it was my treetop property. But that's just the name of how we refer to it. It doesn't literally mean that it had trees. Milai Tanya, we have a brisa that actually illustrates that we do say that. I'm selling you a base core of offer. Even though it only has a lesach, which is half of a base core, it's considered a good sale. Why? He was just using the name base. The place was called base core offer, but it didn't have base core. It only had a lesach. And that Bahu the Miskri base core. Of course, that had to be the name of the property. You can't make it up. It had to be called a name. Or if someone says Karmani Marchalach, I'm selling you my Kerem property. Even if there are no vines in the property, it's a good sale. He's just selling them the property that was identified with that name. But who the mystery karma can't be a scam. It actually has to be referred to by that name. Or I'm selling you an orchard that has rimoinim, that has pomegranates growing. Nevertheless, but who the mystery part is, but that's what the name of the property is. Alma. So you see this point. You see that there is an argument that that's the name of the property, not necessarily there's literally those items in the property. So Achanami name Shema Alma. I just meant to use that name. The tree property, the Shlochem property, it was just a name, it wasn't literal. It makes a very big difference who's saying it. If the owner of the property is saying, here's my tree property, yes, he could claim that was the name of the property. But in our Mishnah, look at the Loshen. It's the farmer that's approaching the owner and saying, I want your tree property. There he means that feature is what I want. So if it's the macher telling the chayker only the property, saying my tree property, he could say, I was just using that name to identify the property, not that there's an actual tree in it. But if the chayker tells that to the macher, clearly kapeda, the farmer wants those features, otherwise he wouldn't be willing to pay so much. Even when the macher tells the chayker, sometimes the macher can't either say that I'm just calling the property by this name. Why? Look at this. If he said zeh, what is the lashon Mishnah? Im amar loy chakar li stede beis hashluchen zu, I saw the beis ilon zeh. Mechlal the kaibegava. Obviously, they're standing in this property. I'm going to rent you this tree field. I'm going to rent you this beis hashluchen. If he's there, why does he have to describe it? We know the property we're talking about. This one that we're hearing. So the kaibegavaskinon. So beis hashluchen lama leila meimar. Why did he have to identify that this is beis hashluchen? We're in the property. Elamai, the Ka'amarlei, Beis HaShlochin Kidekaima Hashta. I'm selling you this Beis HaShlochin like it is in this current condition, meaning there's water that's delivered directly to the field. Somebody was makabel a field from his friend. This is only kabbalas, meaning I'm going to work the field and you as the landlord are going to get 1/3 of the payers. And you left it, and you negligently left it fallow, and you didn't plant the field. So now there's nothing left. So if this was a case of chakiris, it doesn't make a difference. I'm paying grant anyway. So the landlord doesn't give two, it's whether or not you plant it. So that's why this Mishnah only applies by Kabbanusa, Shaminoisa, Kamaril Asos. We'll make an assessment of how much fruit it could have produced. And the farmer has to pay out of his pocket. Because in the contract, it says, if I leave it fallow and I don't work the field, I will pay you with the best of monies. Almost like Meitav by Mas. Reb Meir Hayadorish Loshen Hedget. Loshen Hedget, Dr. Rashi, is if it's not a Takanos Chazal to use such a nusach, but this is what common law did. People used to use these terms, it becomes a given. And even if I didn't write that in the contract, we automatically say that applies because that becomes common law since the derech is to write it. That's what Rashi speaks out, which is a chiddush because it's saying even if you didn't write it, since that's the norm, it's as if you wrote it. So Rashi shir gilu hedjoitos lichtoy shaloiketos chacham. There was not a chacham. That was just common law. But Yadar Shaloshin lish like a din acharov. He would paskin like it. Okay. Rashi doesn't say this beferish. Rashi just says he would paskin like what was written, but what it means is even if they didn't write it, as Rashi says, as Taisa says, the Chachamim were masakin to write this into the contract. It was common law. He gave validity to those terms of agreement. Even though it wasn't written into the contract, ki ilu nichtav. Talked Toisvis the idavka kishakasav. If we're saying that they only enforced these common law practices when they were written, maha yudarish. We don't need it. Pshita sheyesh lelakayim kamay sheisna. The lavas machti. If you write something in a contract, of course you have to honor it. The chiddush is that since it was the norm to write these things in the contract because of common law, now we enforce it even though it's not written, like almost like an achrayis so forth. That becomes the norm for this type of contract. So Rabbi Meir Yudash Lashon Hadid, the Tanya Rabbi Meir Aimer in our Mishnah, although our Mishnah doesn't quote Rabbi Meir, it must be a brisa that quotes Rabbi Meir, but it was to stop Mishnah in Ma'av V'Lev the Shalom Metzia. Rabbi Yudah Yudash Lashon Hadid. There were common law practices that Rabbi Yudah also gave validity to. The Tanya Rabbi Yudah Aimer. Adam maybe carbon usher alishta. A woman really is penniless because her husband owns every penny that she has. So let's say she has to bring a carbon yoledis. By the carbon yoledis, there's 3 carbonas you bring depending on your wealth. The husband's bringing the carbon for his wife. She doesn't have a penny. So if he's bringing it for her and she doesn't have a penny, maybe he should be able to bring the carbon mincha the least of the least. No, since he has money, he has to bring a carbon usher. Any carbon Any carbon that she's chayiv, except for a nether and a dova. Because if he's mechuyev to pay for all the nether and the dovas, then what she could do is she can destroy his whole parnasa by just promising a whole bunch of carbonas. So this only means if she was mechuyev a carbon, she was a zava, or she was a mitzaras, or she was a yoiledes, or she ate chaylev by mistake. So there was a chivchatas. Those carbonas, a husband, because of common law, obliges himself to pay for. From this moment on that I'm marrying you, I will be paying for all your carbonas. So therefore, we consider her an oisher, and he has to give the carbon based on his level of wealth. He can't automatically say that my wife is penniless. So that's another way where we're giving validity to common law. Hillel Hazaka no Yidosh Lashon Hadid. He would do the same. The Tanya Anche Alexandria saying there was a problem that happened in Alexandria. They would be mekadosh their women. Now she's a neshishish. And as they're going into the chuppah, tragically, other men would steal them away, meaning now they're living with an eshishish. Their children are mamzerim. And the chachamim wanted to make the children of these women mamzerim. They're an eshishish, shizinsa. Amalan Hil Azakin. Hil said, 1 minute, please. Hey, Luke. I want to analyze the exact nusach of what was written in the ksuba that was written in Shasta Kedushin, which clarified the terms of the Kedushin. And again, what the terms that will be written in the ksuba are not necessarily a takana. It's common law of what they wrote in those days in their ksubas. Have you like ksuba Simon? You know what it said? Umatza shekasa behen lichishetiknisi lechupa havili leintu. You know what the terms of this marriage is? You become, it's like a t'nai in the Kedushin. When I take you into the chuppah, that's when that Kedushin is going to be chal. Kum techois, now, since they never went to the chuppah because they were chap before, igloyim milsalim are fair, their Kedushin was never a Kedushin, aliyosah b'nei mamzerim. So he's Dorish Lashon Hadid, because this isn't the nusach of a ksuba, but it's common law, that's what they did. And we're saying even if they didn't, the way Tosh was learning, even if they didn't, it was still enforced. Rabbi Yeshua ben Korach Yidosh Lashon Hadid. The Tanya Rabbi Yeshua ben Korach Omer. Hamalvas chaveroi. If I lend somebody money, lo yimash kenenu yosem michayim. If I lend you $100,000, I'm not allowed to take a mashkin from you that's more valuable than the chayv that's, let's say, $110,000. Why? Shekach kois of loy. When I give the mashkin back to the loiva, in other words, I don't want to hold the loiva's thing because he needs it. So out of being merciful, I give it back to him. When I give it back to him, I insist that he write me a shtar, a receipt that I'm giving back this mashkin, and he has to write the following. Where the common law was to write the following: Tashlumta the is loch alai, the money that I owe you now for this mashkin, kol kabel dichi. I'm a kabel to pay you the full value of this mashkin that you gave me. So here, if I only lent him $100,000, and then when I give him back his mashkin, he obliges himself to pay me back the full value of the mashkin, so I'm ripping him off because now he's going to pay me back more than I had originally lent to him. Zok Gemara, time of the cause of lahachi. So are you telling me that it's only because of this common law practice to write that? Otherwise, there wouldn't be a problem of giving him a mashkin that's more expensive? Well, loy cause of lahachi, loy kanya. There wouldn't be that obligation. In other words, you wouldn't say that he's kanya the mashkin and it's his now. And now that he gives it back to the loiva has to pay him for it because now it's no longer a mashkin, it's his, and I'm giving you an object, so now you owe me money for the object. I'll show you, in fact, that the Bachayv owns the mashkin to such an extent that if he gave it back, he's entitled to full payment for the value of the mashkin, which is now considered belonging fully to the malva. Because the Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mishkanoi, the Heishav loy mashkin. A person took a mashkin, and then he gave the mashkin back to the loiva. Exactly this scenario. Umeis, and the loiva died. Shaimtoi me al gabe bona. I have a right, the malva, to go take the mashkin back. If it's a regular mashkin, you don't have a right to take it back because metaltlin of the Yisraelim and not Meshuvat Bachayv. It must be that we look at it like it's belonging fully to the malva, and the malva is literally lending it to the loiva, and that's why you could take it back.
More than.
So because of that, it shouldn't be more, because it would be possible that I'm going to end up collecting more than the value of the alva. So since it could happen, you shouldn't do it. So Zok Gemara, and this is without any common law. Zok Gemara, but the common law helped for something. Ahanu ksiva ligiroin. You know what ksiva helps for? What happens if I give the mashkin back to the loiva and it degrades, and now it's worth less than the chayv? By writing that nusach that I owe you fully, it will allow me to collect at least the full value of the chayv in the event that the mashkin loses value. So Zok Tosfos, with the explanation that the Marsha points out, and I can't say this is the full explanation of the Marsha because this is the Marsha that I'm trying to learn on the plane while I'm falling asleep, and there's a whole bunch of smelly Indians around me. I don't even know how to learn sometimes, but I'll call upon them. The Marsha speaks out that from this Tosfos here on the base that this is not similar to the other cases. In all the other cases, the main halacha was common law. Here, the common law doesn't affect the fact that the mashkin's mine, and when I give it to you, I'm giving you my mashkin. Because that, we just said, would be without the common law. There's a knetch that the common law helps for. The knetch that the common law helps for is that if the mashkin should drop in value, I'm still entitled to collect in full. Next, Rabbi Yosy Yudarish Lashon Hedjed. Rabbi Yosy also gave validity to common law. The Tanya we learned. Rabbi Yosy Mermokim Shenahagu Lasas Ksuba Milve Goiva Milve. If there was a minik in that place where the ksuba was like a milva, which Rashi says, shall komasha kosav mishtar ksubasa. Anything that was written in the ksuba, he said, v'dein nidunya danalas le'mebeinosha le'veispayla. All of this nadan that was brought in from her household into the marriage, nifras mimenu, you can collect back from the husband should the marriage dissolve. He should nisarmelo if the husband dies, or nisgarsha, or if they're divorced. Just like a bachayv can collect anything that's written in the star milva, anything that was written in the star ksuba as having been brought into the marriage by the wife, if the marriage should dissolve, the wife has the right to collect it in full, just like a milva. For instance, we said earlier that the husband accepts achrayis for certain things, like for kabbanis. So anything that was written in the stark suba blibes like a milva, and she could collect even if she's not around. Goy milva, but not only that, it works two ways. If he dies, she gets it. But now that it's written in the ksuba, now her family is obliged to provide those things to the husband. Goy milva, bal goy me'avia bas kol mashakasav v'ksubasa ki'ilu. So sometimes they used to want to make the ksuba look good. So they would write up a whole list of assets that were being brought into the marriage. All those assets that are written as having been brought into the marriage, the husband can actually take that to the bank and force the father wants to give it. He might want to be a shiny Eid. So he writes about all the things that he's giving, so the ksuba should look good. So when they're reading the ksuba and everyone's listening, ooh, wow, he's giving this, he's giving that, right? It looks good. Those are all enforceable. However, lichfoil, where the minig was that if he was giving $100,000, he would write in the ksuba 200,000. Like when they sell Elias, that's what you're referring to. I was thinking exactly the same thing. Like when they sell Elias, goy v'metzia, you only have a right to ask for half because it was public knowledge that you always wrote double in the shtar ksuba of what you actually were giving. So it was understood that you only have to give half. But in those days, there were also schwitzers.
Everybody was listening.
That's right. Ooh, wow. What's getting us in the novel? That's right. That's right. Nahar Beloi, could you imagine the Rosh Shiva is reading the Ksuba and he's giving $100,000? You still owe me $200,000. Right? Okay, sag the Gemara weiter. Nahar Beloi, Gavu Tilsa. So I guess once everybody knew that it doubled, so you had to make it even better. So that it's like mamish like inflation, and then they knew you could only collect a third. Mereimar magve nami shavacha. Mereimar said, no, you wrote 200,000. That's what you're going to pay. Mereimar collected on the full face value of the ksuba. Amalei Ravina Mereimar. So Ravina told Mereimar, how could you do that? But Tanya, we have a brisa that says that. If everybody writes double what they really mean to give, so then the shtar ksuba only means that you take half of it. So it's your Mereimar. If there was time written in the ksuba, that's not serious. People will write the amount that double what they really are going to give. But if there was a kinyan made on that, that's already serious. Then you collect the full value. Because of Labarte, Meshabach, because of Labarte, Ravina also wrote to his daughters, and Rashi, I believe, says that this was when Ravina was, that's Viter. I'm sorry, I'm skipping to the next one. So Ravina wrote to his daughters, and he wrote, also, he inflated what he was going to give. Amrulay Nikni Minedamar. So the Chassan wasn't an idiot. He also looked at this Gemara. He says, maybe we should make a kinyan, Shver Leben, on what you're promising. Amalu, I give you a choice. Imakne le michvel. If you want a kinyan, then I'm only going to write exactly what I'm giving you. Imichvel, you want me to promise the world? We're not going to make a kinyan. I'll give you a choice. I can buy you a $10,000 watch and you can have it until after the chasana. I can buy you a $2,000 watch and you can keep it. Give you a choice. Hahu Gavra, the Amalahu. And this Hahu Gavra was a Shchivmara. Rashi is a Metzia Machmas Misahi. He was dying, so he wanted to distribute his assets. So what did he do? He said, Havu Lahu, Hahu Gavra the Amalahu. This fellow said, Havu La Arba Meya Zuzi Labarti Diksubasa. I want you to give 400 zuz for my assets to the ksuba. And the question was, what did he mean? Did he mean actually give 400, which means they should write 800 in the ksuba? Because it's agaret. When you say you're giving 400, that means you could say 800. Or did he mean, I want to promise 400, but they only want to give 200? So does that mean I want to give 400? And therefore, the way that will be expressed in the ksuba is by saying 800. Let's see. What did he say? The inun tabni meya. If he said, give her 400, meaning 800, so he made it clear. Or he if he wrote havula arba zuzi, if he said give her 400 zuz, that means if he wants to actually give her 400 zuz, that means the inun tabni meya. That means you should write 800. But if he didn't say havula, he said ksuvala, so then we know he meant that he only wants to give 200. There's another version of how it was paskened. We see. If he says, I want to give her $400 towards ksuba, he wants to give it to her, that she should get it. Then arba mezuzah, in time to meya. The big subasa, I want to give her 400 in her ksuba, so that means he just wants to write it in the ksuba, and therefore arba mezuzah in masa. But v'lohi, all of these piskei halacha are not accurate. Loish nadamer liksubasa, v'loish nadamer big subasa, arba mezuzah the inun masan. you always say tefasta, lo tefasta, he means the least. Always assume no matter what your shver promises, all the different ways to interpret it, he means the least. Ad amr havulustama, unless he just said havustama. If he said give her this, that's a different story. Okay. Zog the Gemara weiter. Hahu gavra, the kabel aramei chavre. Someone was accepted land in order to work a farmer took it from a balabais in order to work the property. Amr, he said, E move rana law, if I leave it fallow, not like what our Mishnah said, I'm going to pay you the value of what the field should have produced. Rather, I'm going to pay you an exorbitant amount. Yahivna lach alpha zuze. I'll give you 1,000 zuz, which was way, way more than what the property would have actually produced. So what happened was, over Tilsa, he worked 2/3 of the field, and 1/3 of the field he left fallow. So Amr Nardoi, Nardoi the Paskin, Dinahu, the Yoivle Tlas Meya Betlasam Tilsa. You give him $333 and a third dollars because that's 1/3 of the 1,000 that he promised should he leave the whole field fallow. Rav Amar, you don't give him a penny. Asmachti Asmachta Loikan. So you remember when we learned the Shgav Asmachta, we learned that if it's something that's somewhat in his control, right, we had the different madregas. If it's completely out of his control, then maybe he means it. If it's somewhat in his control, so he thinks he might be able to pull it off, but not totally in his control, then if it's a realistic commitment that matches the losses, there it would be a smachtakanya. But if it's an exaggerated amount, like it is here, it's a smachtakanya. Zok Gemara Ularova, according to Rav, who says this is an asmach lakanya, Maishnam Yehadet Nan Ayar Mishnim, Oyver Evid, Ashalim B'Mitva, Zok Gemara, Hasam like a gazim. Ashalim B'Mitva is I'm paying what I damaged you. Hara, Kivin the Kamer Milsa Yiserta, since you're offering an exorbitant amount, Guzma Ba'almu the Gazim, he never really meant to be Mechayiv himself. Who covered the Kabul Ara L'Shumshmi. Shumshmi, I believe, are sesame seeds, right? Right? The sesame seed shumshmi. Either I always mix it up between sesame and poppy. Sesame. Now, sesame seeds are much more valuable than chitin. The problem is they also suck a lot more nourishment and weaken the field. So there's a plus and a minus. And what did he do? Zora chiti. He actually didn't do what he said he would do. He would deviate it and he planted chitin. Of the chiti kishumshmi, it was such a great yield, such a bountiful yield. The value of the chitin were equal to the value of the shumshimin, and there's an extra bonus that the property didn't get depleted from its koiches. So Savar of Kanal Memar, of Kanal Atzat to say, Menaka lekach shadira. I delivered you instead of $100,000 worth of shumshimin, I delivered $100,000 worth of wheat, and you saved money because now your field isn't depleted. I want some of that back. So I should be able to deduct some of that 100,000. Instead of giving you 100,000, I'll only give you 90,000 because it was at a much lower cost to the energy in your field. You can't say that because Amri, you know what the owner of the field would say? I need $100,000 to support my family. I can't afford to give you a deduction on what you're going to give me. So I was happy to allow my field to be weakened because I didn't have an option otherwise. I needed the income from it. So you can't on your own unilaterally decide that, oh no, I gave you the same value, so I'm deducting the cash. I'll accept the cash because I need the money. What about a different case? Who gave the kavalar l'shumshimi zorachiti of the chiti tveimin shumshi. Instead of producing $100,000 worth of shumshimin, he produced $110,000 worth of chitin. Now that even outweighs the cash as well. Rabbeinu held here, the owner doesn't have a tithe anymore. I'll accept the cash so I need 100,000 because I produced 110,000. So let me at least keep the extra 10 or part of the extra 10 because you'll still get your bare minimum, what you need. What you think all of the credit of the reason why there was a great yield is only because of the farmer, because of his miracle growth. Of course, the earth had a lot to do with it as well. So you don't have a right to demand part of that. You know why? Because as much as you put in extra, the land is also responsible, and you don't get credit for that. That credit belongs to the owner of the property. Okay. Zok to Gemara weiter. Amri Nardoi. Nardoi said, High Iska, Palga Milva, Upalga Bigon. We know that if we go into business together and we do an Iska, the way it works is I'm going to give you, let's say $1,000. $500 of that will be a pekadon, which means whatever profit is made, I'm going to get. The other half is milva. So whatever profit is made, you get, right? That's how Iska works. So Abud Rabban and Milsa, they made an arrangement where it would be worthwhile for the Malva to invest with this person because he'll get profit. And it's profitable for the Loiva because he also has an opportunity to benefit. So Hashid Armi and Palga Milva, now that half is a Milva, if half is a Milva, I can do whatever I want with that money. The Pekadon money I have to invest for you. But the Milva, technically, even though I told you I was going to go and invest it, but if he wants to drink beer or just use it for his household expenses, shopper dummy. He should be allowed to do that. It's none of your business what I do with my Milva. But Rav Amar, no chance. Lahari Karla Iska. It's not called a Milva, it's called an Iska. You know why? The Amr Lay, the Malva, tells the Loiva, yes, I lent you the money, but I lent you the money with a condition, to do business with it to make money, not to use for your personal expenses. Okay, we'll stop here, and we will be Mamshech B'Shem tomorrow or tonight. Do we want to learn tonight? What time should we learn tonight? Should we start at 1 or 12? Usually 12 is like 2. You have to rush to get it for 12. So we should start at 1? I'm sorry. So you think we'll make it by 1? You think 1 will be safe? Okay, we'll make it. We'll learn at 1, and we'll learn however far we get. That's how far we'll get.
A lot of food.
Because I'm going to what I plan to do is learn tonight or tomorrow's stuff tonight. But I plan to continue preparing for the rest of the night. So whoever wants to hang out, we can just prepare together. And then tomorrow afternoon, I'm going to say tomorrow's stuff for those people who aren't going to have a whole night. And then the next day, before mincha, I'll say the next day's stuff. Okay, thank you very much, Rabbi Yosy. Have a geshmake, beautiful Yom Tov.